Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. In today's The Hindu newspaper, there are just two topics that are relevant for our examination. So let's start with the first one by looking at this column from page number 6. This column deals with the topic of patent protection for vaccines and essential medicines and drugs that are needed to fight and contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Just yesterday, we spoke about this topic in detail and we understood the nature of proposal that India and South Africa have brought up in front of the WTO. Last year, India and South Africa placed a joint appeal in front of the WTO to grant a patent waiver for COVID-19 vaccines and for drugs and medicines related to COVID-19 so that patented vaccines and drugs could be mass produced around the world, even in developing and underdeveloped countries, in order to promote global health equity. Because otherwise, patented drugs and vaccines are the preserve of high income developed countries, and these patents are largely owned by big pharmaceutical companies and multinational corporations. This cost prohibitive nature of patented vaccines and drugs makes them completely unaffordable to the common people, thereby increasing global health inequity. Especially the developing and underdeveloped countries are at the receiving end, while developed countries and large pharmaceutical companies stand to make a lot of profit even during times of a medical emergency. So, considering the unprecedented crisis created by the pandemic, India and South Africa last year pushed a proposal at the WTO seeking support from all the WTO members for a patent waiver for essential vaccines and drugs under the flexibility that has been provided in the TRIPS mechanism of the WTO. This proposal of India and South Africa initially didn't receive much support, especially from high income developed countries. And we need to remember that any proposal at WTO needs consensus of all the members because decision making at the WTO is consensus based and decisions are not made through the process of voting. Hence, every WTO member holds a veto. And for this proposal to go forward, India needed the support of large countries, especially that of the United States. Now, considering the deadly spread of the pandemic, the Biden administration in the US extended support to India's proposal. And along with this major breakthrough, important powers such as France and Russia have also extended support to this proposal of India and South Africa. But however, as expected, the big pharmaceutical companies and MNCs, along with a few developed nations like Germany, have opposed the proposal. And in fact, last year, when the proposal was made, many developed countries, including US, UK, Switzerland, European Union, Japan, and Australia, were opposing any patent waiver. But now, considering the humanitarian crisis, US, France, and Russia have extended support. But still, many countries such as Germany, along with big pharmaceutical companies, are opposing the patent waiver. So, in this column, the writer evaluates the arguments that are being made against patent waiver, which we also discussed yesterday in our analysis, and he offers an effective counter to each of these arguments. Because the writer firmly believes that such a patent waiver during this crisis will go a long way in combating the pandemic by promoting global health equity and by making essential vaccines and drugs more accessible and affordable to the poor countries of the world. See, the first major argument against patent waiver made by the pharmaceutical companies and few countries is that even if a patent waiver is granted, many countries do not have the capacity for production. And even if the patented technology is transferred to them, they have expressed doubts about the abilities of companies in developing and underdeveloped nations to produce quality vaccines and drugs with the same safety standards. Even popular philanthropists such as Bill Gates have taken a stand against the patent waiver and they have defended the need for having strict IP laws in place in order to ensure the quality and safety of the vaccine and the drugs. But however, this argument doesn't hold good according to the writer because these very companies, these very big pharmaceuticals and MNCs, they have been contracting the manufacturing of several vaccines and drugs to smaller companies in developing and underdeveloped nations because in those countries the production cost happens to be very low due to low labor costs and other associated costs, which in turn translates into higher profits for these multinational corporations. In the pre pandemic era, these very companies were conveniently contracting and outsourcing production to factories that were located in smaller countries. But today, they are questioning the capacity and capabilities of smaller countries and smaller factories around the world by raising doubts over the quality and safety of such vaccines and drugs. The writer says that this is nothing but hypocrisy on the part of few developed nations and few large companies. Because if quality and safety is the concern, then they can be assessed any day through credible regulatory agencies and global institutions such as the WHO. But their argument that smaller countries lack the capacity and capabilities to produce such high end vaccines and drugs falls apart because these very companies have been contracting the production of their patented vaccines to smaller countries in order to realize higher profits. The next argument against patent waiver is that the big pharmaceuticals have suggested that it would be better to license a few select manufacturers in smaller countries instead of waiving off the patent entirely. They have suggested that let the patent remain with the owner and the patent holder can lease out or license out the technology to few select manufacturers in order to scale up the production of vaccines. But this suggestion is also not valid because such contracts between the patent holder and the smaller manufacturers is always opaque. And usually, in such cases of licensing, only a select few manufacturers are given the contract. And hence, this will not ensure any equity with regard to availability and affordability of vaccines. And there is no guarantee that under such arrangement, the vaccines are going to become cheaper. The third argument placed by these companies and few developed countries is that developing and underdeveloped countries can be provided the required vaccines through the COVAX facility, which has been created by the WHO and the Gavi Vaccine Alliance. And such arrangement and transfer of vaccines from developed countries to developing underdeveloped countries is sufficient according to them. But data from the ground shows that the COVAX facility, even though it has been functioning quite well, it has not been able to rise up to the challenge, and the assistance it has given out to small countries, especially in Africa, is grossly insufficient. Data shows that small states in the United States have received more vaccines than even entire countries in Africa. Through the COVAX facility supported by WHO, many small poor countries have been receiving vaccines from developed nations and as well as from major manufacturing hubs like India. But this transfer of vaccines through COVAX facility is simply not sufficient to deal with the scale of the challenge. These companies have even argued that even if they waive off the patent, there is no readily available capacity to scale up production immediately, which could help us fight the pandemic as of now. But this argument of these companies also doesn't hold good because many countries such as Canada, South Korea, and many others have already expressed willingness to take up vaccine production on a large scale, provided if the patents are waived off. Then, even under the WHO, there is a platform that has been created known as the mRNA Vaccine Technology Transfer Hub, through which WHO facilitates the transfer of vaccine technology to private firms, which are ready to mass produce the vaccines at reasonable costs. Under this initiative of the WHO, around 50 companies from around the world, especially from smaller countries, have already approached the WHO, thereby clearly indicating that there is ready capacity available through which vaccine production can be scaled up around the world. A classic example for this readily available capacity is India. Just look at how India has positioned itself as the global pharmacy and the world's largest manufacturer of vaccines and generic drugs, which is a result of its well thought out strategy to shift from product patenting to process patenting between 1970 and 2005. We had this discussion yesterday in detail, and I even explained what is product patenting and how is it different from process patenting. For nearly 35 years, India followed process patenting, which allowed India to emerge as the global pharmacy and as the world's largest manufacturer of vaccines and drugs. But later, under the WTO TRIPS regulations, India had to scale back and start abiding by the intellectual property standards that were laid out under the TRIPS regulations. So now, if patents are waived off, There are many countries like India, Canada, and South Korea where ready capacity is available to scale up vaccine production, and that too high quality, safe vaccines can be produced, which will help in making these vaccines and drugs more accessible and affordable, thereby improving global health equity. So, the argument of these companies and few developed countries that this is going to take a lot of time to have any positive impact on the ground doesn't hold good, because there are several countries and several companies where ready capacities exist to immediately scale up production. Then another argument of the developed countries is that China would unnecessarily benefit out of such a patent waiver, and they've alleged that China would exploit the situation to its advantage and gain an unfair lead over the other countries. Again, this argument of the developed countries doesn't hold good, because, as the writer says, during a pandemic, these geopolitical conflicts do not matter. And moreover, China has also shown enough willingness to help out the global community to deal with the pandemic. From the very initial days of the pandemic, even though China has been very opaque about sharing details, it did share genome sequencing details. And this genome data shared by China has been extremely helpful to the scientific community in developing the vaccines. So the argument that China would get an unnecessary lead or that China would exploit the situation to its advantage doesn't hold good. And the writer argues that now is the time for the global community to come together by keeping away these differences in order to jointly fight the pandemic. Then, of course, is the age old argument that patent protection is absolutely needed to incentivize innovation. Yes, this argument is very valid and true that scientific innovation and large investments in research and development can be incentivized only through patents and strict intellectual property rights regime. But these patents and the innovation becomes useless if it is not available and affordable to the common people, especially in poor and developing countries. And this is also the time for major countries and big companies to keep away their profit motive and work with each other on humanitarian grounds. So the writer says that these arguments of the big pharma and few developed countries doesn't hold good, and countries like India should take the lead from the United States, which has extended support for patent waiver. And without waiting for a WTO's resolution, India should make use of compulsory licensing, which is allowed under WTO. That is, the Doha Declaration under TRIPS provides for this flexibility, through which governments can authorize their domestic companies to mass produce even patented drugs in case of a public health emergency. Recently, in a daily quiz, we had discussed what is compulsory licensing in detail. In compulsory licensing, the patent holder doesn't lose their patent right, but without their permission, a government can authorize other companies to produce and develop the patented products, and the patent owner would even be eligible to receive royalties from the companies that are producing the patented drugs. Because waiting for such a patent waiver through WTO might take a lot of time, as decision making at the WTO is consensus based and not through voting. So instead of waiting for that, countries like India, they should take confidence and take the lead from the United States. And with the backing of major powers like France and Russia, they should go ahead and start issuing compulsory licenses through which essential vaccines and drugs can be mass produced. According to the writer, at a time when the world is facing its gravest crisis, it would be justified to drop the protection offered by patents in order to promote global health equity. Next, in a related article on page number 14, the chief of WTO has urged the proponents of this proposal that was brought up by India and South Africa to submit a revised formal document so that text based negotiations can begin as soon as possible to decide upon the temporary patent waiver for essential vaccines and drugs. See, at such multilateral organizations, contentious topics are debated through text based negotiations, during which contesting parties exchange each other's texts that elaborates and clarifies their respective positions. And eventually, by looking into each other's proposals, they hold further negotiations and consultations with all the concerned parties, and they take forward the negotiations in a step by step manner to eventually arrive at a suitable compromise through a text based document. Next, we have another column on page number 6 that deals with the economic impact of the pandemic. Say, we all know very well that the pandemic and the lockdowns and restrictions associated with it has already disrupted millions of livelihoods. And people have not only lost their jobs and income, but even their basic food security and social security has been affected. While governments and civil society have focused enough on livelihoods, food security, and social security, they haven't focused enough on rent security, which is absolutely essential in a urban setting, because a guaranteed shelter is a key component of the urban social safety net. The writers of this column argue that rent security is as important as food security and wage security because even the lack of shelter or the fear of losing one's shelter is going to have a significant impact on the socio-economic status of urban workers, especially migrant workers, and even those workers who have moved into urban areas to settle for the long term. See, various surveys have shown that in urban areas, an average worker spends nearly 40% of his income on house rent. So, this is a considerable part of his expenditure, and the urban workers, particularly migrant workers, became all the more vulnerable last year due to the breakout of the pandemic and the imposition of the lockdown. As many workers lost their jobs and their income, it became difficult or nearly impossible for them to pay their rent on time, thereby threatening the very security and stability of the entire family. Because having a roof over one's head is as important as food security or wage security. And these dire circumstances pushed many workers to borrow from money lenders, and thereby they ended up being placed under a huge debt burden. Millions of migrant workers who couldn't afford this rent any longer, they started quitting the urban areas and they started heading back towards their villages on foot, creating one of the worst humanitarian disasters that India has witnessed. We all came across gut wrenching stories of workers walking hundreds of kilometers, and many of them even losing their lives on this journey. And this clearly exposed the fragile socio-economic status of our migrant workers and urban workers. To provide them with some relief, the Ministry of Home Affairs issued a notification last year along with the lockdown guidelines, under which the Home Ministry mandated that landlords should not demand rent from their tenants for a period of 1 month. But these guidelines of the center were very vague, and it wasn't clear whether the rent was being waived off or the rent was just being deferred to other months. This lack of clarity created confusion amongst both the landlords and the tenants, and the center did not provide for any enforcement machinery to enforce these guidelines. So eventually, the matter was left to be decided between the landlords and tenants. And while in some cases, gracious landlords agreed to waive off or defer the rent, keeping in mind the dire situation of their tenants, there were many cases where landlords demanded the rent to be paid because they themselves would be dependent on this rent as that would be their sole income. But overall, these guidelines were not effective and did not help out the worker community. And also, it did not guarantee any livelihood security to the landlords who were solely dependent on rent. Last year's experience with the lockdown has clearly shown us that many tenants, especially migrant workers in urban areas, they are forced to carry out a trade-off between rent and spending that money on essentials such as food, education, medicines, etc. Many migrant families and worker families they had to forego other essential expenses on food and medicines in order to pay rent on time. At the same time, there were cases where tenants refused to pay the rent by citing the MHA notification, and this deprived many landlords of their sole source of revenue. So the writers point out the rent issue has been largely ignored as a COVID stress point, and this issue should be given the same attention as that of food security and wage security because the non payment of rent has a huge impact on those who are dependent on it, that is, the landlords, and at the same time, the forced payment of rent when the tenants are not capable of paying it places a huge financial burden on the tenants as well. So now, considering that India is in the middle of a second wave, The government needs to wake up and proactively needs to take a few steps through which a solution can be worked out for this rent crisis. The writers suggest that a few steps are possible, and to begin with, the government can call for a rent moratorium where it can clearly spell out whether the rent is being waived off or deferred for a certain period. Then, to execute and implement this moratorium, it needs to put in place an effective enforcement machinery. And to ensure that the landlords do not suffer any unnecessary losses, a part compensation can be arranged by the state. This is very much needed for those landlords who are solely dependent on rent revenue for their sustenance. Parallelly, to help out the tenants who are being pushed into a debt burden, the government can think of providing limited cash transfers, similar to how cash transfers are provided for food security and social security. Then finally, governments need to learn a lesson from the last year's lockdown because despite the grave economic situation, even poor workers who were paying hefty rents, they were forced to pay all their utility bills by the utility service providers. And this payment of electricity bill, telephone bill, water bill, etc. pushed these workers into further misery. Maybe this is where the governments can step in and provide for some relief to these workers, wherein such workers can be identified who are facing the burden of payment of rent and they could be exempted from paying certain utility bills for a certain period, such as electricity bills and water bills. The money that they save over here can be used for payment of rents, and this could be another alternative that the government could work out. So, all in all, such timely and proactive intervention is needed from the government, at least this time around, to guarantee this basic urban social safety net to urban workers and migrant workers. Now, let's look at the mains practice questions. The first question: the US supported patent waiver in the fight against COVID has the potential to bring in much needed global health equity. Evaluate. The second question: the second wave of the pandemic has amplified the issue of rent, which does not draw much attention as food and income support do. Elucidate. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So, this concludes our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.